Friends, today is Thursday, November 7, 2024. You're watching a VPC video devotional. I'm Dr. Dave Joynt, and today we're going to look at some wonderful verses from 1 Peter, chapter 2, verses 7 and 8. And in these two verses, we have two different, somewhat contrasting, but very important verses for understanding what makes an authentic church. So I'm going to read those, and then we're going to reflect a little on Matthew 21, verses 42 to 44, where Jesus picks up the imagery, that same imagery that Peter does from Psalm 118:22 of the stone that is rejected, and he talks about that in the context of a parable he tells that is sometimes called the parable of the wicked husbandman, the wicked agrarian workers. So here we go. 1 Peter 2, 7 and 8. This honor then is for you who believe, but for those who, that is the honor to be a holy priesthood, to be living stones, part of God's spiritual building. It's for you who believe, but for those who do not believe, the stone that the builders rejected has become the very head of the corner, a stone that makes them stumble and a rock that makes them fall. They stumble because they disobey the word as they were destined to do. So on the one hand, an authentic Christian community is one that is very engaged with people who are not believers. And of course, those come into different categories. Some of those have beliefs that are just odd or strange. I mean, I go to Sedona occasionally to hike. And there are some individually formed, quite lunatic versions of spirituality that are on display. When you go into restaurants there, they give you, some of them give you a little mat that you can take away, a paper mat the plates go onto, and it describes all these weird forms of therapy and counseling you can get from kind of self-appointed gurus that are there in that area. There's that area, because it's so beautiful, has attracted a whole kind of strange community of folks. And so some folks outside the church are off base. Others are vague. They would describe themselves as a spiritual person, but when you ask them what that means, they can't really give an answer. Some people have no faith whatsoever in anything, and so the faith factor, their belief factor is kind of non-existent. And some have a worldview that is actively hostile to Christianity. But as Christians, we're to be engaged with all four of those categories. Jesus came to seek and save those who were lost in confusion and darkness. And we hear later on in this wonderful chapter that we're to celebrate because God has brought us out of darkness into his marvelous light. And we're engaged in that same task of helping people move from this confusion into greater clarity, move from vagueness into specificity, move from being off base into walking the way of God. And so that is a marvelous, challenging, wonderful calling that draws us out into the world. But as we go out into the world, we have to know that an authentic church also is one that understands there is just one rock, one foundation, one Lord, one faith, one baptism. And those unwilling to accept the living lordship of Jesus are going to stumble over this truth. The truth of his resurrection, the truth of his reign, the truth of his abiding authority, his eventual judgment. They're going to fall over that, just like many of his Jewish opponents did. And so the authentic church does not minimize the importance of Jesus. It never relegates his grace and rule, his commands and his authority to some secondary, optional, kind of provisional role. And that insistence on what we call high Christology, an enormous role for Jesus in time and in history, and in history's conclusion, is crucial for the church. So we have to be open and connected to people in all their confusion, but we have to be strong on the idea of Jesus as the one sure foundation. Let's take a moment and pray. Lord, show us how to be open to those who work and live in confusion, and show us how to be Christ-centered in all our thoughts and all of our ministry. We ask this in your Son's great name. Amen.